You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Well, it's the best of times and the worst of times, to quote Dickens. The worst of times needs no explanation given who sits in the White House. The best of times, ironically, qualifies because of the way that ordinary folks are rising up to combat that worst of times. And among those ordinary folks are not only voters, but a free press, perhaps at the very front lines. The free press in this country has been under continuous assault and encouragement to violence from this White House, and at times the violence has in fact borne terrible poisonous fruit, as in the murders of a newsroom of the Capital Gazette in Maryland a while ago. Mostly here, however, the attacks have been verbal and censoring. But abroad the violence is epidemic. The burning down of newsrooms and television stations, the assassinations of journalists. What we don't always pay attention to is the censorship that takes place at an earlier level against journalism here. I'm talking about high school journalism. And my guests today are two very special young women, 16-year-old women, who went up against a Texas high school principal for censoring their school paper, at which they are journalists. It's such an interesting story and such a heartening one. And of course we also have Surrealism Corner and Fighting Words, and we better get started by going inside the headlines. In partnership with BBC America, the Women's Media Center has released yet another new report. It's called Superpowering Girls: Female Representation in the Sci-Fi/Superhero Genre. And it's the first in a series of studies from both organizations highlighting the impact of that representation on youth between age 5 and 19. Every demographic group surveyed expressed a desire for more female heroes in the sci-fi and superhero genre, with girls, especially girls of color, and also boys of color, most likely to want more sci-fi superheroes who look like them. Naturally, this study is important. For example, teen girls are significantly less likely than teen boys to describe themselves as confident, brave, and listened to, heard. And this recommended change in sci-fi and superheroes representation addresses precisely that. You can get the entire study for free at womensmediacenter.com. I'm sure you've heard that voting rights advocacy groups in Georgia have filed a number of lawsuits after reports that Brian Kemp, the Georgia Secretary of State, who is also the Republican nominee for governor, is not only controlling the election in which he's running, but that he has locked away more than 53,000 voter registrations, including a brazenly disproportionate high number of African American would-be voters. For decades, Kemp has practiced this kind of manipulation and voter suppression in Georgia, and now he's deploying it against what could be the first black woman governor in the nation. His opponent, Stacey Abrams, is the former Democratic leader in the state Senate, a feminist, a dynamite activist on all the right issues, a previous guest on this program, and she is running a superb, grounded campaign with very close numbers in Georgia. Now, this idea of controlling the election in which Kemp himself is a candidate is so blatantly rule-breaking that it's difficult to understand how he dares even try to get away with it. Then again, consider North Dakota, whose Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp is up for re-election. She's about as middle of the road as they come for a Democrat in a red state. But she voted her conscience on Kavanaugh because she believed Dr. Blasey Ford. Her major support would be coming from the sizable Native American population of the state. So, the Republican legislature changed the laws about voting in between the primary just a month or so ago and the upcoming election. Suddenly, now, surprise! Native Americans living on reservations cannot vote unless they have street addresses, which happen not to exist on reservations because they're largely rural and use post office box addresses. Voters' rights groups are in court about that one, too, and Heitkamp's seat could well determine the balance of the Senate. So this is another bold-faced, shameless tactic of the GOP. I am not that partisan a Democrat, and am very critical of the Democratic Party, but what has happened to the GOP is literally astonishing, pathetic. But it is also an example of the now surfaced racism and misogyny loosed on the nation by the GOP, a once great party. Politico has reported that all told, Republican campaigns or affiliated groups sank $28.4 million just into anti-Hillary Clinton and anti-Nancy Pelosi messaging over the last month alone. Neither one is running for anything. Trumpists now chant, lock her up, at his rallies. They chant it not only about Hillary, but also about Pelosi, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Dianne Feinstein, and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. This is pure woman hatred, fostered by Trump. One news item that got insufficient coverage is that Washington State's Supreme Court struck down the death penalty, making it the 20th state to do so via legislation or the courts. The state's Chief Justice wrote that the state's capital punishment law lacked fundamental fairness and that it was unequally applied when it came to race. About time. Yay, Washington State. Speaking of the penal system, according to an NPR and Medill School of Journalism investigation, women are disciplined more harshly than men in prison. Women in California prisons between January 2016 and February 2018 had 1,483 years added to their sentences, thanks to so-called good credit revocations, the revoking of good credit, and that's a much higher rate than for men. And in Massachusetts, women were restricted to where they could go in a prison twice as often as men. On the other hand, while I rustle through papers here looking for a smidgen of good news, there's a study from Fender, the guitar company, showing that 50% of all beginner and aspirational so-called guitar players are now female. When the company found similar results a few years ago, it was assumed that the ratio might be a transient result of the Taylor Swift factor, but it seems to have turned into a lasting trend. Oh, and here's a happy bit. There are signs that Fox News viewers are tired of watching Trump's rallies, and he's no longer a sure bet to top Fox's regular programming. A late August rally received just over 2.5 million viewers. That's a frightening amount, however, to me. Anyway, the 2.5 million were compared to a regular 4 million viewers for rallies in 2017, and also compared to a 2.8 million average for Tucker Carlson's show in that primetime slot. The network has recently stopped airing Trump's events in their entirety, not wanting to cede its primetime programming. Look, if the attention span of Trump's most rabid admirers were longer than that of a drunken mayfly, they wouldn't be following him in the first place. A scathing new report on Britain's House of Commons has just been released, describing a culture of bullying, abuse, and sexual harassment as, quote, embedded as it is shocking, where complaints of mistreatment are muffled by, quote, difference, subservience, acquiescence, and silence. The inquiry, led by a former High Court judge, Dame Laura Cox, was commissioned in March after a BBC report found that harassment complaints were being batted away by employees to protect the interests of senior staff members. Among the legislators named was Speaker John Kurt Burkow, the flamboyant conservative who has chaired the House of Commons Commission overseeing administration of the House since 2009. The first Secretary of State, Damian Green, a close ally of Prime Minister Theresa May, was found to have breached the Ministerial Code of Conduct and was forced to resign from the cabinet in December. Judge Dame Laura Cox wrote that the core cultural context must be changed and that it would most likely require a generational turnover. The House of Commons Executive Board described the report as difficult reading. Their statement also said that they fully accept the need for change, but were not specific as to how or when that would take place. Finally, according to a new report published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, we humans have hastened the extinction of more than 300 species of mammals, thus depriving them of 2.5 billion years' worth of unique evolutionary history. The study's lead author believes we are currently in the middle of a sixth mass extinction. For reference, the fifth mass extinction was the one that killed all the dinosaurs. Do you suppose we're the dinosaurs this time? We have to take a short break, but we've got 2 future Pulitzer Prize winners still coming up. And before that, in our next segment, we need to pop into the surrealism corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back, and welcome to the Surrealism Corner. Melania Trump has proclaimed herself the most bullied person in the world. I think that's actually probably true. My God, look at who she's married to. A recent New York Times report found that white Americans earn about 77% of the total income in the United States. That's just in case you thought that racism was a thing of the past or that economic justice had already arrived. Ta-da! The Register newspaper in Des Moines, Iowa, reports that lewd, intimidating conduct has created a toxic state house in the state capitol. For more than a decade, legislators and staff members engaged in lewd and sexually aggressive behavior, according to detailed court depositions that the newspaper reviewed. The depositions, taken under oath by about 24 lawmakers and legislative staffers, comprise more than 1,000 pages of documents previously unreleased. They were part of a landmark sexual harassment case that resulted in the state of Iowa paying a $1.75 million settlement last year. The depositions detail more than 50 instances of inappropriate behavior, including multiple staff members watching pornography at work and male staffers gathering to view videos of topless women jumping on a trampoline to the tune of Jingle Bells. Well, that certainly is mature. Staff members and lawmakers described female co-workers in sexually derogatory ways, and one senator gossiped that a female senator was sexually promiscuous, while another senator asked a staff member on the Senate floor about the size of her nipples. Now, this is Iowa, folks, wholesome, the butter cow, America's heartland, America's breadbasket, corn-fed Iowa, producing Chuck Grassley, whom you will recall was outraged on the Senate Judiciary Committee that Dr. Blasey Ford had dared smear Judge, now Justice, Kavanaugh. If you feel your rage rising, I have 2 suggestions. First, acknowledge your right to justifiable fury in today's political climate. But second, understand that the newest approach of Russian internet trolls is to raise the level of hostility in the American public. For instance, Russian trolls have been infiltrating the American debate about the safety of vaccines, according to a new study published in the American Journal of Public Health. Now, that debate itself is crazy to me because vaccines are vaccines and you don't want to get the bad stuff that you will get if you are not vaccinated against it. But anyway, there is such a debate, and Russian bots and hackers have been infiltrating it. Instead of taking one side, these trolls and the bots they program hurl insults at both pro- and anti-vaccine advocates, and the study concluded that their sole intent is to raise the level of hostility. Quote, "You see this pattern," said David Brontiatowski of George Washington University and the lead author of the study. Quote, "On guns or race, these accounts take opposite sides amid lots of debating. They're about sowing discord." Close quote. So watch out. Although these days, if you trust the internet, particularly Facebook, about anything, you're way behind the gullible curve. Prince Mohammed bin Salman, yes, the same young crown prince who appears to have ordered the torture and assassination of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The same crown prince who decreed that women could drive in Saudi Arabia now, but imprisoned the women's rights activist who had been pressing to drive for decades. The same crown prince who refuses, right in the middle of his modernization plans, to end the guardianship laws in Saudi Arabia that keep women lifelong minors. That prince, MBS, as he's called for shorthand, once hosted a major business summit not too long ago at Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton. This was a summit that featured a humanoid robot named Sophia, and she was awarded by him with Saudi citizenship. MBS did not let her drive, but neither did he put her in prison or torture her or murder her. Safer to be a Saudi robot than a Saudi human, it seems. A wide-ranging survey by the distinguished Pew Research Center is drawing attention in this midterm year when a record number of women are running for offices at every level. The survey looks at the density of women in leadership roles, with university presidents having the most women, 30%, and chief executive jobs having the fewest, only 5%. The survey also looks at another element, the leadership skills people believe women bring to a job. The results, well, they're both familiar and more favorable to women. If you check out the leadership attributes queried in the survey, you find that women fared better on almost all of them. Of the leadership qualities listed for political leaders, men fared better than women on only one, being willing to take risks. Men and women were equally favored on working well under pressure. Of the 12 traits listed for business leaders, women fared better on all but 3, risk-taking, being persuasive, and making profitable deals. The survey is unclear as to how the list of traits were selected or how these qualities are defined. I would, for example, argue that women are great risk-takers because they date and get engaged to and marry men, or at least some of them do. Big risk there. Being persuasive, I would argue that women are the most persuasive of all because they've been trying for 10, 20 millennia to become full human beings in the eyes of their other human inhabitants of the planet. Well, maybe they're not so great at being persuasive then after all. As for making profitable deals, it all depends on how you define profit. Only monetary, or in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Anyway, back to the numbers. 31% of respondents said women were better at being honest and ethical, a leadership trait that 91% said was essential for political leadership, while 4% said men were better. That's quite a spread. 42% said women were better at working out compromises, compared with 8% who favored men, for a quality 78% felt was essential in politics. Meanwhile, 89% said that creating a safe, respectful workplace was an essential quality for business leaders, and respondents favored women by far, 43% to 5%. Some differences were even bigger, but were perceived as being less essential. 59% said women were better at being compassionate and empathetic, compared with 4% favoring men. 84% said providing good pay and benefits was essential. 28% said women were better at this trait, while only 5% favored men. Now, this is a complex, controversial area into which stereotypes clearly can leak, compassion, empathetic. But there is some academic evidence that women tend to be more democratic and participatory leaders, compared with the command and control styles of men. We've been socialized that way. Other research shows that female managers motivate people more with positive incentives and what is termed transformational leadership. That is, inspiring inspiration, inspiring people to develop skills, and motivating them to use them. The surrealism, of course, is that women still have to fight so hard to get into positions of leadership at all, when data is clearly emergent that women fare better on most leadership traits. And here's a little language goodie, Mokita. M-O-K-I-T-A, Mokita. It's a word variously used in Papua New Guinea and sometimes among the Maori in a slightly different form in New Zealand or Aotearoa. It means a truth everyone knows but agrees without saying not to talk about. For instance, everyone in the White House, in Trump's family even, knows that Donald Sr. is stark, raving, certifiably psychotic, but nobody talks about it. The Trumpists are all in Mokita. Last, only 8 words to close the surrealism corner today. Kanye West in the Oval Office praising Trump. I just might have to rename the surrealism corner Normal Wednesday. Time for another quick pause, but coming right up is my conversation with 2 young 16-year-old high school journalists who stood up to their Texas principal, Texas, and fought for a free press. Don't go away. This is thrilling. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with my 2 guests together who will give you hope for the future. Neha Madhira, age 16, is a senior at Prosper High School and is editor-in-chief of her school's online paper, Eagle Nation Online. She strongly believes in student press freedom, and she is fighting to get the New Voices law passed in Texas, and we talk about that. And her opinion piece about the national school walkout criticized the high school administration for deliberately scheduling a number of activities, including group bonding and singing of the school song, at the time of the April 20th protest, which was organized in the wake of the massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. So, rather than have the students walk out, the administration thought to deflect them, and the editorial opinion piece took that on. Haley Stack, my other guest, also age 16, is assistant editor of Eagle Nation Online and wrote an opinion piece that argued against the school's removal of the novel A Separate Piece from the sophomore reading list. And their journalism teacher, a 35-year teaching veteran who has led their paper to more than 175 journalism awards over the last school year, learned that her contract would not be renewed. That's Ms. Oglesby Petter. Well, here they are to speak for themselves, Neha Madhira and Haley Stack. Neha and Haley, welcome to Women's Media Center Live. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Well, you are my new heroes. There's been crackdowns, as we all know, coming from the White House against the press, and viciousness spewed against a free press. And this has been going on for some time in high schools. In Orange County, California, a principal condemned a school publication for an issue that focused on teenage relationships, one of which was an abusive relationship that a girl had with a boy, another of which was an affirmative gay relationship. In a town near Salt Lake City, a high school administrator deactivated a school's news website after a student journalist posted an investigative article about a teacher's dismissal. And this started, in a sense, in 1988 when the Supreme Court ruled that a Missouri school district acted lawfully in taking down a 2-page spread on divorce and teenage pregnancy from a student newspaper. And since then, administrators have been able to censor work in school publications unless, as in 14 states, there are specific laws in place meant to safeguard school publications from interference. You are two heroes of freedom of the press. Neha and Haley, whoever wants to go first, tell the story of what happened in Dallas with your high school paper.
This is Neha. Yes, hi. So we were censored and prior reviewed throughout the year last year, and the censorship started in October, and then there were 2 more pieces that our principal had censored, and so it was 1 news story and 2 editorials. The one in October was a news story over the cancellation of a movie day, of a senior movie day, and that was a tradition at our school, and it was censored. You know, the 3 recurring, the same, oh my goodness, the recurring theme of censorship for all 3 pieces that he had censored was that they weren't positive, that they weren't uplifting to the school, that they cast the school in a bad light, all of that stuff. And the 2 editorials were, the first one was over a removal of a book from the sophomore reading list called A Separate Piece. And then the second editorial that was censored was a piece that I had written about National Walkout Day. We had a team bonding activity, and it didn't go well because there were kids that were holding up their hand, that were holding up their arm to resemble the Nazi salute, and it was also unfortunately 420, and so there were kids that were holding up our little eagle sign with their fingers to resemble a blunt. There were kids yelling that there would be a school shooting, all of that stuff. So we had written, I wrote what had happened and then solutions to how we could fix things like that in the future, and he didn't like it.
And he being the principal, Burdett, right?
Yeah, John M. Burdett.
John M. Burdett. And this, of course, is all taking place at Prosper High School in Prosper, Texas. And around the same time that you folks were censored, your journalism instructor, Lori Oglesby Petter, who sounds like a terrific woman, was, because she defended you, was forced into early retirement. Am I correct?
Yes. So in Texas, we have probationary contracts, which means that an employee for a district has to work in their school district for 2 to 3 years. It depends on your district before they're given a reason to why they're fired. So because it was Miss O's third year, it hadn't been the end of 3 years yet. They hadn't given her a reason to fire her. Her evaluation, her teacher evaluation, was close to perfect, and they had told her that they wouldn't recommend her for renewal after after Dr. Burdett censored Haley's piece, which was the first editorial he had censored.
Haley, take a minute and tell us about your piece, and then I want to go back to the fact that you've triumphed because Burdett has backed down. But take a minute and tell us about your piece and how it came to be written.
So my piece is an editorial piece over the book, A Separate Piece, and basically, we were reading this book in the sophomore class, and some students started saying about how they thought that the characters were a little bit gay towards each other, and how they thought maybe there was like an underlying theme behind the book. And every day in class, students were constantly just like making jokes about like how gay the book was. It was so funny. And like the teachers would try and calm everyone down so that like they weren't talking about it too loudly. And then eventually, when we were about a quarter of the way through the book, we all came into class one day, every sophomore class, went into their English classes on whichever day they had it, and they were all told that we would no longer be reading A Separate Piece while we were already in the middle of doing it. We had already had a test over one of the chapters, and so suddenly everyone started questioning it, and it eventually came out that the book was removed because of student complaints. And so I wrote an editorial piece about how in today's day and age, with all the movements that have been made in favor of gay rights, that it's ridiculous to have a book removed due to gay undertones.
Which wasn't even there. I mean, it's a little hilarious, except that, just recently the State Board of Education in Texas voted to eliminate several historical figures, including, wait for this, Hillary Clinton and Helen Keller from the state's social studies curriculum. The first woman to seriously run for president, and Helen Keller, who, the decision made by the 15-member body reportedly came as part of an overall effort to, quote, streamline the state's social studies curriculum. Doesn't that take your breath away? So, in other words, if we can't bury the existence of people that are troublesome, are not positive about patriarchy, then we certainly shouldn't cover them in a free press. How did we discover that you'd won and that Burdett backed down?
We discovered that we had a meeting about a week before we started school back with our new advisor to meet her, and she could meet the editorial board. And she told us that she had a meeting with Dr. Burdett where she had asked, do we still have prior review? And Burdett simply told her no. And that was the first that we had heard about it. And since then, he has held to that. We no longer have to submit our editorials or any other stories to him for him to read before we publish them. We're just allowed to freely publish as a newspaper should.
Wow, that's a triumph for all of us in journalism. And what about the process of getting the Texas legislature to join the other states that I referred to earlier, that there are 14 states that have laws to safeguard school publications from interference? Is there any chance of getting the legislature in Texas to pass such a law?
Yes, so this is Neha. Over the summer, after everything kind of happened and we were working, we were still publishing on our newspaper through the summer, and we were publishing news stories and slideshows just because we didn't really know what we could publish since we weren't getting any communication from admin. So while we were doing that, a lot of advisors and students from other states started to contact us, and we started speaking with other advisors that already had, or that either already had New Voices in their state or were working towards it. And from then, we started speaking about New Voices at conventions. One of them was the Gloria Shields Convention in June, and we are still teaching sessions about New Voices and what it's all about at other workshops and conventions in October and November. And in November, when the bills first filed, and after when the session starts, we plan to go to Austin and kind of have lobby days and talk to legislators. And we've been working with Mary Beth Tinker, and she's been really wanting to help, even though her schedule kind of is a little bit crazy too. So we're really trying our best.
Identify her for people who might not know.
Well, Mary Beth Tinker is, the Tinker from Tinker versus Des Moines, the Supreme Court case that had the famous line, "Students do not shed their rights at the schoolhouse gate." And so she, travels around the country on the Tinker, or she traveled around the country on the Tinker tour. She gives First Amendment talks. She's a big advocate for First Amendment rights and student rights.
That's terrific. I take it you two both want to be journalists?
Yes.
Yes, I plan to go to college and study journalism.
That's Haley?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. And Neha, you? Yes, I guess. Because you're already you're a senior and you're editor-in-chief of the online newspaper Eagle Nation Online. You are such a thrill to an older journalist like me. You really are, because you got it. You really get it, and you stood up for the right thing. And it's so interesting because we've also talked with young journalists who are Parkland students and who, managed to cover the situation while running from the gunman. And you just all thrill me and give me hope for the future.
Thank you. So this is Neha. Thank you so much. We were definitely scared before we spoke out. It was kind of, it was an option that we had since April, and we had started talking about it, and it kind of took all of us a month to realize that was something that we needed to do. Since when we were first told that our former advisor, Ms. Oglesby, wouldn't be recommended for renewal, we had sent the editorial board, actually, we had put together a letter and sent it to the principal, the superintendent, and every member of the school board, and we received no response. And then shortly after, we were told that she would indeed be fired. So then that was kind of, we had a couple more meetings with him. When he censored our third piece, my editorial, he'd actually called my father, and we had this huge meeting, and that's when he said that he would ban editorials.
Wow.
So when we had tried to set up a meeting with him to see what the new editorial policy would be, really the last straw was when he told us that he wouldn't be communicating with us about that anymore, and he would only tell our new advisor. So we knew that we really had no other choice than to, stand up and speak out.
It was this is Haley, it was kind of one of those things where you have to put the fear of the consequences aside and do what you know you have to do.
Oh, I love you both so much. Yes, you do. But to learn that early is, I know many people would say, oh, what a pity, because people shouldn't have to learn that early, the joys of childhood and adolescence, etc. But I think, frankly, it's wonderful that you learn that early, and you have more time to make good trouble. And save the world. So I am your number one fan. Thank you so much, both of you, Neha Madhira and Haley Stack, for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. And I know that at some point, I hope that we can check in with you again, and you can join our roster of young correspondents around the country reporting on things in their area. Keep us posted should the school renege or should you have more victories, and keep on keeping on the wonderful things that you do. It's been an honor to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is Haley, and we will definitely keep you updated on what happens, if anything changes and what not.
This is Neha. Well, we're still pushing for the new voices legislation, and we have a way to go. But we will definitely keep you posted. You inspire us, so we will make sure to keep you in the loop of everything.
Well, it comes right back at you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Time for one last break, and then I'll return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
And we're back once more, this time with some fighting words. One of the many reasons I love the global women's movement is that it teaches us Americans, citizens of the so-called indispensable country, so much, not the least of which is humility. Just a day or so ago, I was reading about an interesting new problem facing women in Australia, specifically in the Australian state of Queensland, which is known for being very conservative. Feminists in Queensland have tried and failed for decades to do away with a criminal code dating back to 1899 that makes having an abortion an offense punishable with prison time. Yet another attempt is being made this week, but the situation has changed. The Queensland Parliament has an impressive level of representation for women. The Premier, the head of government, is a woman, Anastasia Palaszczuk, of the Labour Party, the first woman in Australia to be elected to 2 terms. Her deputy is a woman, and so is half her cabinet. And in another first, the opposition, the Liberal National Party, is also led by a woman. Deb Frecklington. Although Australia nationally is still a deeply male political culture, state and territory legislatures have made significant strides toward gender equity. Tasmania's government became one of the first with a majority female cabinet. Victoria's parliament is nearly 40% women. But the test in Queensland is particularly interesting because this is the first time pro-choice advocates must deal with female leaders on both sides of abortion policy. But the discourse seems pretty civilized, certainly compared with what we currently endure in the United States. For example, the opposition leader has stated that while she is not personally in favor of overthrowing the ban on abortion, she will allow her members to vote without party guidance as a matter of conscience. Difficult to imagine one of the hard-right token women here who would take such a position were she to hold power. Furthermore, the law as it stands is rarely prosecuted, and allows for limited exceptions, as when a woman's physical or mental health is threatened, and that cuts into efforts to change the law. Nevertheless, there are rare instances when the authorities investigate such cases, as when, in 2009, a 19-year-old faced criminal charges after officials said she used medication smuggled from Ukraine to induce miscarriage. Other than that, the arguments on both sides are pretty much the same as here, including the religious ones, but politer. Except that women now lead both sides. I know, I can hear you say, now that is a consummation devoutly to be desired. I agree, we should only have such problems. And surely we're beginning to, with record numbers of women running for office, although more run as Democrats here than the Republican boys will let run in their party. But it also set off bells in my mind about the now surfacing again debate as to whether women are a people or not. Every time women in great numbers rise up together to change things, there are always the voices of doom saying, "But not all women," and but Brett Kavanaugh never tried to rape me. And, but I've known, fill in the blank, Bill, Donald, Harvey, Mario, Charlie, Louis, on and on for years, and he's always behaved like a gentleman. Which is perfectly irrelevant. If I rob your house, that doesn't mean I have robbed every single house on the street. As for the "but suburban white women voted for Trump" argument, yes, they did. They voted with their husbands, defending their relatively privileged status. But after 2 years of Trumpism, all polls now predict that they are turning away from Trump and joining the gender gap. Then there are activists who bite the bait of these arguments and fall into despair, as if it takes the participation of every single female human being on the planet to make feminism the powerful global force it is. So we merely have the vast majority of women? So what? So there are the Marsha Blackburns and Dana Loesch's and Ann Coulters and Jean Pirros. There were house slaves on plantations who wanted nothing to do with field slaves because they were in a privileged position, or perceived themselves as being such. There were Jewish capos in the Nazi concentration camps. There have always been collaborators here and there who sided with the powerful for what crumbs they could get. So there are a few rare Me Too cases where the woman was the perpetrator. That is supposed to delegitimize the literally millions of cases where the woman was victimized by a man or men? False equivalence and then some. "You don't speak for all women because you don't speak for me," becomes their cry. Well, chill out, sister, I say. I'm not trying to speak for you. The men in your life apparently are already doing that. But I will never stop speaking out for the great mass of women who do suffer such indignities every day, and who know that. And I will never again stop speaking out for myself. In the ethereal realms of feminist academic scholarship, there's a name for the "all women are one people" argument. It's called essentialism, the concept that there's an essential bonding between women that triumphs no matter the politics. Some well-meaning people who see feminism as abstract from daily activism have called me, for example, an essentialist. I'm not. Certainly not in a misty-eyed way where we're all moving in sync toward some ideal nation of women. That's women spelled W-I-M-M-Y-N or W-O-M-B-O-N-E. Yet I do think the shared experience of having been born female and lived lifelong female in a patriarchy leaves its own marks on each of us. I also think that emphasizing that similarity and acknowledging our differences but not dwelling on them moves us closer to recognition of each other and ourselves across boundaries of race, class, age, ability, sexuality, and nationality. That, in fact, is what has built a global movement. The increased presence of women in all parties in the Queensland Parliament, for example, has so far contributed to a shift in the working culture there, including more family-friendly hours in which Parliament is in session, and breaking from the tradition of frequent long nights followed by early mornings. Men in all parties were dumbstruck when these came in. In New Zealand, the young Prime Minister brings her baby with her right into the General Assembly Hall at the United Nations. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois has nursed her newborn daughter in one of the Senate cloakrooms. This changes things. It changes furnishings, space allotment, attitudes, consciousness. It's the hidden reality in which women exist, entering what has been the male public sphere. So the debate on abortion in Queensland will reflect levels of nuance and comprehension in ways that a male-dominated legislature simply would not. The political positions will be robustly defended as usual, yet the experience of reality in a different way than men experience it, and the insistence that laws recognize other realities, changes things. When the Queensland Parliament was considering domestic violence legislation, at least one member described abuse she had faced in deeply personal terms. The opposition leader, Ms. Frecklington, said, It certainly does shift the debate. So the next time someone says, "You don't speak for me," smile and shrug and say, "More's the pity for you, sister." Or say, "Apparently neither do you," and move on. Or, if your higher self has the energy, engage her. We were none of us born feminist. I sure as hell wasn't. The next time you see a woman stand up to defend a misogynist or sexist or even sexual abuser, don't attack the woman. Just continue to confront the man, not his hostage shield. There are too many women who need you and me and each of us marching by their side and speaking up for each other. Perhaps I am an essentialist in that I do believe that every woman deep in her heart suspects the truth, and it's only a matter of time and circumstance as to when and if and how much she can dare let herself know it and articulate it, much less act on it. So I'll put in my work elsewhere, but I'll keep the door open a crack, so that if Kellyanne Conway appears, weeping with the shock of having finally got it, I can welcome her in. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for today. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRobinMorgan and on Facebook at facebook.com/TheRobinMorgan. Check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for our show. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.